Eternal Echoes presents Intimacy by Jean-Paul Sartre. Lulu slept naked because she liked to feel the sheets against her skin and because washing was expensive. At first, Enrique protested, "One does not get into bed naked. That's improper. It's dirty." However, he eventually followed his wife's example, though, for him, it was mere carelessness. When around people, he was as stiff as a board out of habit. He admired the Swiss, especially the Genevans. He found them very dignified because they were made of wood. But in small matters he was careless. He wasn't very clean. For example, he didn't change his underwear often enough. When Lulu put them in the laundry, she couldn't help but notice that the fabric at the bottom had turned yellow from rubbing against his crotch. Personally, Lulu didn't dislike a bit of dirt. It added intimacy, casting soft shadows, like in the crease of an elbow. She didn't care for the English, those impersonal bodies that didn't smell of anything. But her husband's neglect disgusted her because it was a form of self-indulgence. In the mornings, upon waking, he was always tender with himself, his head full of dreams. And the light, the cold water, the bristles of the brush, all felt to him like brutal injustices. Lying on her back, Lulu had slipped her left big toe into a tear in the sheet. It wasn't a tear, just an unstitched seam. It annoyed her. "I'll have to fix it tomorrow." But still, she tugged at the threads a little, enjoying the sound of them snapping. Enrique wasn't asleep yet, but he was no longer bothering her. He had often told Lulu that as soon as he closed his eyes, he felt bound by thin yet unbreakable ties, unable to lift even a pinky finger, a fat fly trapped in a spider's web. Lulu liked feeling that large captive body against her. If only he could stay like this, paralyzed, I would be the one to take care of him, to clean him like a child. Sometimes I would turn him onto his stomach and spank him, and other times, when his mother came to visit, I would find any excuse to uncover him, lift the sheets, and she would see him completely naked. I think she'd faint. It must have been 15 years since she last saw him like that. Lulu lightly ran her hand over her husband's hip and pinched him slightly in the groin. Henri grunted but didn't move. Reduced to impotence, Lulu smiled. The word impotence always made her smile. When she still loved Henri and lay beside him, paralyzed like that, she liked to imagine that he had been patiently tied up by many tiny men, the kind she had seen in an illustration when she was little and read the story of Gulliver. She often called Henri Gulliver, and he liked it because it was an English name and made Lulu seem educated, though he would have preferred if she pronounced it with an accent. How much they must have bored her. If he had wanted someone educated, he could have married Jean Bidet. She had breasts like hunting horns but spoke 5 languages. When we used to go to Sceaux on Sundays, I was so bored with his family that I would pick up any book, and there was always someone who would come to check what I was reading, and his little sister would ask me, "Do you understand it, Lucia?" The truth is, they didn't find me refined. But the Swiss, now those are refined people, because his older sister married a Swiss man who gave her 5 children and imposes them on others with his mountains. As for me, I can't have children. It's something constitutional. But I've never thought it was particularly refined, the way he acts when we go out together, always running off to the urinals while I'm left staring at the building facades. Looking like what? And then he comes back out, pulling up his pants and walking bow-legged like an old man. Pleasure of feeling alert next to that soft, captive flesh. She heard a borborygmus. A singing stomach irritates me. I can never tell whether it's his stomach or mine. She closed her eyes, liquids gurgling in countless damp tubes. They exist in everyone. Inside Rirette, inside me. I don't like thinking about that. It makes my stomach ache. He loves me, but he doesn't love my intestines. If he were shown my appendix in a jar, he wouldn't recognize it. He touches me all the time. But if you put the jar in his hands, he wouldn't feel anything inside. He wouldn't think, this is hers. You should be able to love everything about a person, the esophagus, the liver, and the intestines. Maybe people don't love them because they're not used to them. If they could be seen like our hands and arms, maybe they would be loved. Then starfish must love more than we do. When the sun is out, they stretch themselves on the beach and push out their stomachs to let them breathe, and everyone can see them. I wonder how we would do it. Through the navel? She had closed her eyes, and blue discs started spinning, like yesterday at the fair. I shot at the discs with rubber-tipped arrows, and some letters lit up, one at a time, forming the name of a city. He stopped me from spelling out Dijon completely, with his obsession of pressing up against my back. I hate being touched from behind. I wish I didn't have a back. I don't like people playing tricks on me when I can't see them. They can have their fun, and, meanwhile, I can't see their hands. I just feel them moving up or down, and I can't predict what they want. They watch everything they can, and I can't see them. He loves that. Henri would never think of it, but all he ever does is press himself against my back. I'm sure he touches my backside just for pleasure because he knows I'm mortified to have one. It excites him that I feel ashamed. But I don't want to think about him. She was afraid. I want to think about Rirette. She thought about Rirette every night at the same hour, at the exact moment her husband started mumbling and groaning. But there was some resistance. His face wanted to show itself. For a few moments, she saw his thick, black hair and shuddered because you never know what will come. If it's just the face, well, that's manageable. But there were nights when she couldn't close her eyes because of the filthy memories surfacing. It's terrifying when you know everything about a man, especially that. Henri is different. I can imagine him from head to toe, and it makes me feel tender toward him because he's soft. His flesh completely gray, except for his stomach, which is pink. He says that a well-formed man's belly, when he sits, makes 3 folds, but his makes 6. He just counts them in pairs and ignores the rest. She felt excited thinking about Rirette. Lulu, you don't know what a beautiful male body is. That's ridiculous. Of course I do. She means a body as hard as stone, with muscles. I don't like that. Patterson had a body like that, and I felt soft as a caterpillar when he pressed against me. I married Henri because he was supple, because he looked like a priest. Priests are gentle, like women in their cassocks, and they seem to wear stockings. When I was 15, I wanted to gently lift their robes and see their men's knees and their underwear. It seemed strange to me that they had something between their legs. With one hand, I would have lifted the robe, and with the other, I would have slid my hand up their legs, all the way up to where I know. It's not that I particularly like women, but a man's thing, when it's under a robe, is delicate. It's like a big flower. The problem is, you can never just hold it in your hands. If only it would stay still. But it starts moving like an animal. It hardens. It terrifies me when it's hard and completely upright. It looks brutal. Love is so dirty. I loved Henri because his little thing never got hard. It never lifted its head. I used to laugh. Sometimes I kissed it. I wasn't afraid of it, no more than a child. At night, I would take his soft little thing between my fingers. He would blush and turn his head to the side, sighing, but it wouldn't move. It would stay there, discreetly, in my hand. I didn't squeeze it. We would stay like that for a long time, and he would fall asleep. Then I would lie on my back and think about priests, about pure things, about women. And first, I would caress my stomach, my beautiful flat stomach. Then my hand would go lower, and there was pleasure. Only I know how to give myself pleasure. The thick hair, the black hair, and the anguish in my throat like a lump. But she pressed her eyelids shut tightly, and finally, it was Rirette's ear that appeared. A small red and gold ear that looked like crystallized sugar. Seeing it, Lulu didn't feel as much pleasure as usual because she could hear Rirette's voice at the same time. It was a sharp, precise voice that Lulu didn't like. You must leave with Pierre, my little Lulu. It's the only intelligent thing to do. I care a lot about Rirette, but she annoys me a little when she takes herself too seriously, so pleased with what she says. The night before, at La Coupole, Rirette leaned forward with a reasonable yet somewhat sullen air. You can't stay with Henri. It would be a crime since you don't love him. She never misses a chance to speak badly of him. I don't think that's very kind. He's always been polite to her. Maybe I don't love him anymore. Maybe it's true. But it's not for Rirette to tell me. With her, everything seems simple and easy. You love or you don't love. But I am not so simple. First of all, I have my habits here. And besides, I love him. He is my husband. I would have liked to hit her. I always feel the urge to harm her because she is fat. That would be a crime. She raised her arm and I saw her armpit. I always like her better when her arms are bare. The armpit. It opened slightly, like a mouth, and Lulu saw pinkish flesh, slightly wrinkled beneath curly hairs that looked like strands of hair. Pedro calls her chubby Minerva. She doesn't entirely like that. Lulu smiled because she was thinking of her little brother Robert, who once told her she was in her slip. "Why do you have hair under your arm?" And she replied, "It's a disease." She liked dressing in front of her little brother because he always made strange remarks, and one wondered where he got them from. And he touched all of Lulu's things, carefully folded her dresses. His hands were so nimble. He would be a great dressmaker one day. It's a charming profession, and I would design some fabrics for him. It's curious that a child would think of becoming a dressmaker. I feel like if I had been a boy, I would have wanted to be an explorer or an actor, but not a dressmaker. But he has always been a dreamer, doesn't talk much, follows his own thoughts. As for me, I would have liked to be a charity nun, to go begging in rich houses. My eyes feel very soft, soft like flesh. I'm about to fall asleep. My beautiful pale face under the wimple would have a distinguished look. I would see hundreds of dark antechambers. But the maid would light a lamp immediately, and then I would see family portraits, artistic bronzes on the consoles, and a few coat racks. The lady of the house would come with a little notebook and a 50-franc bill. "Here, sister." "Thank you, madam. May God bless you. Goodbye." But I wouldn't have been a real nun. Sometimes, in the omnibus, I would have winked at a man. He would have been surprised at first, then followed me, making a few jokes, and I would have had him arrested by a policeman. The alms money, I would have kept it for myself. What would I buy? An antidote. That's ridiculous. My eyes soften, I like it, as if they had been soaked in water and my whole body feels comfortable. The beautiful green tiara with emeralds and lapis lazuli. The tiara spun, and it became a horrible ox's head. But Lulu was not afraid, and she said, "Help, the birds of Cantal, steady." A wide red river ran through arid plains. Lulu thought about her meat-cutting machine, then about pomade. That would be a crime. She started and sat up in her night, her eyes hard. They torture me, can't they see? I know well that Rirette means well, but she, who is so reasonable with others, should understand that I need to think. He told me, "You will come, with eyes of fire. You will come to my house for me. I want you all to myself." His eyes horrify me when he tries to be hypnotic. He needed my arm. When I see those eyes, I always think of the hair on his chest. You will come. I want you all to myself. How can people say such things? I'm not a dog. When I sat down, I smiled at him. I had changed my powder for him and painted my eyes the way he likes them, but he didn't notice anything. He wasn't looking at my face. He was looking at my breasts, and I wished they would dry up on my chest just to annoy him. But I don't have much. They are very small. You will come to my villa in Nice. He said it was white with a marble staircase that leads to the sea, and that we would live completely naked all day. It must feel strange to climb stairs when one is naked. I would make him go up ahead of me so he wouldn't look at me. Otherwise, I wouldn't even be able to lift my foot. I would remain motionless, wishing with all my heart that he would go blind. But that wouldn't change anything. When he is there, I always feel naked. He took me by the arm, looking perverse, and said, "You carry me in your skin." And I was afraid and said, "Yes. I want to make you happy. We will go on car rides, boat trips, travel through Italy, and I will give you everything you want." But his villa is barely furnished, and we will sleep on the floor on a mattress. He wants me to sleep in his arms, and I will smell his scent. I would like his chest because it is dark and broad, but it is covered in a lot of hair. I wish men had no hair. His is black and soft like foam. Sometimes I caress it, and sometimes it horrifies me. I shrink away as far as possible, but he crushes me against him. He will want me to sleep in his arms. He will hold me, and I will smell his scent. And when it is dark, we will hear the sound of the sea. And he is capable of waking me up in the middle of the night if he feels like doing that. I will never be able to sleep peacefully except when I have my period, because then, in any case, he will leave me alone. Though it seems some men do it with menstruating women and then have blood on their bellies, blood that is not theirs, and also on the sheets, everywhere. It's disgusting. Why must we have bodies? Lulu opened her eyes. The curtains were tinged red by a light coming from the street. There was also a red reflection in the mirror. Lulu liked that red light, and a chair was silhouetted like a Chinese shadow against the window. Henri had placed his pants over the chair's armrest. The suspenders hung in the void. "I need to buy him new suspenders." "Oh, I don't want to go. He will hold me all day, and I will be his. I will give him pleasure. He will look at me and think, 'She is my pleasure. I have touched her here and there, and I can do it again whenever I want.'" In Port Royal, Lulu kicked the sheets. She hated Pierre when he remembered what had happened in Port Royal. She was behind the fence. She thought he had stayed in the car looking at the map, and suddenly she saw him. He had come silently behind her and was watching her. Lulu kicked Henri. That would wake him up. But Henri just grunted, "Hump," and did not wake up. I wish I could meet a beautiful young man, pure like a girl. We wouldn't touch each other. We would walk by the seaside hand in hand, and at night we would lie in twin beds, like brother and sister, and talk until dawn. Or else I would love to live with Rirette. Women are so delightful with each other. They have thick, soft shoulders. I was very unhappy when she fell in love with Fresnel. It disturbed me to think that he caressed her, ran his hands slowly over her shoulders and sides, and that she sighed. I wonder what her face looks like when she is lying there, completely naked under a man, feeling his hands move over her flesh. I wouldn't touch her for all the gold in the world. I wouldn't know what to do with her, even if she wanted me to, even if she said, "I accept," gladly. But if I were invisible, I would want to be there while they did that to her, watching her face. I doubt she would still look like Minerva, brushing lightly against her parted knees, her pink knees, and hearing her moan. Lulu, with a dry throat, let out a brief laugh. Sometimes one has such thoughts. Once, she imagined that Pierre wanted to rape Rirette, and I helped him. I held Rirette in my arms. Yesterday. Her cheeks were flushed. We were sitting on her couch, pressed against each other, her legs tight together. But we said nothing, and we never will. Henri started snoring, and Lulu whistled. I'm here. I can't sleep. I'm in turmoil, and the idiot snores. If he held me in his arms, if he begged me, if he said, "You're everything to me, Lulu. I love you. Don't leave." I would make that sacrifice for him. I would stay. Yes, I would stay with him, just to please him. Rirette sat down on the terrace of the dome and ordered a port wine. She felt tired and was irritated with Lulu. And the port tastes like cork. Lulu mocks me because she always drinks coffee, but in any case, one cannot always drink coffee at aperitif time. Here, they drink coffee all day or café au lait because they don't have a cent, which must be nerve-wracking. I couldn't do it. I would break the whole business in the customers' faces. They're people who don't need to put on appearances. I don't understand why she always arranges to meet me in Montparnasse. It would be just as close to her house if we met at the Café de la Paix or at Pam Pam, and that way I wouldn't have to go so far from my work. I can't explain why it saddens me to always see these same faces. The moment I have a minute, I have to come here. On the terrace, it's still tolerable, but inside it smells like dirty laundry. I don't like failures. And even on the terrace, I feel out of place because I'm too clean. Those passing by must be surprised to see me among these people who never shave and these women who have a certain air. They must say to themselves, "What is she doing here?" I know that sometimes in summer, some fairly wealthy American women come, but it seems they are now stopping in England because of the government we have. That's why the luxury trade isn't doing well. I've sold less than half of what I did at this time last year, and I wonder what the others are doing since I'm the best salesperson. Madame Dubeche told me so. I feel sorry for little Yanel. She doesn't know how to sell. She hasn't been able to make a single extra cent beyond her salary this month. And when you've been on your feet all day, you'd like to unwind a little in a pleasant place, with some luxury, a bit of art, and well-dressed staff. You'd want to close your eyes and let yourself go. And then there would be soft music. It wouldn't be too expensive to go from time to the dancing at Ambassadeur. But the waiters here are so insolent. You can tell they serve people of little consequence, except for the little dark-haired one who waits on me. He's kind. I think Lulu likes being surrounded by all these types. She'd be afraid to go somewhere a little more elegant. Deep down, she's not confident. As soon as a man has refined manners, she's intimidated. She didn't love Louis. Well then, I think she feels at ease here. There are some here who don't even wear detachable collars with their poor airs, their pipes, and the looks they give. They don't even try to hide it. You can tell they don't have money to pay for women. And yet, that's not exactly lacking in the neighborhood. It's even unpleasant. You'd think they were going to devour you. And they're not even capable of politely expressing their desire and presenting the matter in an appealing way. The waiter approached. "Dry port, madam?" "Yes, thank you," he added kindly. "What lovely weather." "It's about time," Rirette said, laughing. "That's true. It seemed like winter would never end." He left, and Rirette followed him with her eyes. I really like that waiter, she thought. He knows how to keep his place. He's not overly familiar, but he always has a word for me. A small, special attention. A thin, weary-looking young man stared at her insistently. If you want to catch a woman's eye, at least wear clean clothes. That's what I'll say if he speaks to me. I wonder why she doesn't leave. She doesn't want to hurt Henri. I find that far too noble. In any case, a woman has no right to ruin her life for an impotent man. Rirette detested impotent men. It was something physical. She must leave, she decided. Her happiness is at stake. I'll tell her she mustn't gamble with her happiness. Lulu, you have no right to gamble with your happiness. I won't say anything more. That's it. I've told her 100 times. You can't force happiness on people against their will. Rirette felt a great emptiness in her head because she was so exhausted. She looked at the port, thick in her glass, like liquid caramel, and a voice inside her kept repeating, happiness, happiness. It was a beautiful word, moving and solemn. She thought that if she had been asked for her opinion in the Paris Soir contest, she would have said it was the most beautiful word in the French language. Has anyone thought of that? They say energy, courage, but that's because they're men. A woman should have been asked. Women are the ones who can find that word. There should have been two prizes, one for men, and the most beautiful word would have been honor, another for women. I would have won. I would have said happiness. Honor and happiness, they go well together. That's amusing. I'll tell her, Lulu, you have no right to ruin your happiness. Your happiness, Lulu. Your happiness. Personally, I find Pierre very suitable. First, he's a good man, and then he's intelligent, which doesn't hurt. He has money, he'll be attentive to her. He's one of those men who know how to handle the little difficulties of life. That's pleasant for a woman. I really like it when a man knows how to take charge. It's just a nuance, but he knows how to speak to waiters, to maitre d's, and they obey him. I call that having presence. That's probably what Henri lacks the most. And then, there are some health considerations. With the father she had, she could pay a little more attention. It's charming to be thin and delicate and never feel hungry or sleepy, to sleep 4 hours a night and run around Paris all day placing fabric sketches, but it takes a certain recklessness. She should follow a rational diet, eat little at a time. That seems fine to me, but often and at regular hours. By the time they send her to a sanatorium for 10 years, it will be too late. She looked perplexedly at the Montparnasse square clock, whose hands pointed to 11:20. I don't understand Lulu. She has a strange temperament. I've never been able to tell whether she likes men or dislikes them. Still, she should be happy with Pierre. It's a bit of a change from last year's type, her reboot, as I used to call him. This memory amused her, but she held back her smile because the thin young man kept looking at her, and she caught his gaze when she turned her head. Raboot had a face full of blackheads, and Lulu enjoyed squeezing them out with her nails pressed against his skin. It's disgusting, but it's not Lulu's fault. She doesn't know what an elegant man is. I adore dapper men. First of all, men's stylish clothes are so beautiful. Their shirts, their shoes, those gorgeous iridescent ties. It may be rough in a way, but it's so sweet. It's strong, a gentle strength, like their scent of English tobacco and cologne, and their skin when they are freshly shaved. It's not like a woman's skin. It's like cordovan leather. Their strong arms close around you. You rest your head on their chest. You breathe in their strong yet sweet scent of well-groomed men. They murmur sweet words. They wear beautiful clothes, sturdy cowhide shoes. They whisper, "My darling, my sweet darling." And you feel like fainting. Rirette thought of Louis, who had left her the previous year, and her heart tightened. A man you love, who has all these little things, a ring, a gold cigarette case, and a few small habits, except that they can be such scoundrels, worse than women. The best would be a 40-year-old man, one who still takes care of himself, with graying temples and hair combed back, very lean with broad shoulders, very sporty, but who knows life and is kind because he has suffered. Lulu is just a child. She's lucky to have a friend like me because Pierre is starting to get tired, and there would be plenty of people ready to take advantage instead of telling her, like I do, to be patient. When he gets a little tender with me, I act like I don't notice. I start talking about Lulu, and I always find a way to make her seem valuable. But she doesn't deserve the luck she has. She doesn't realize it. I wish she had to live a little alone like I have since Louis left. Then she'd know what it's like to come home alone at night after working all day, to find the room empty, to be dying to rest your head on a shoulder. You wonder where you find the strength to get up the next morning, go back to work, be charming and cheerful, and give courage to everyone when you'd rather die than continue such a life. The clock struck 11:30. Rirette thought of happiness, of the bluebird, the bird of happiness, the rebellious bird of love. She started. Lulu is 30 minutes late, as usual. She will never leave her husband. She doesn't have enough willpower. Deep down, she stays with Henri mostly for respectability. She cheats on him, but as long as people call her Madame, she thinks it doesn't matter. She says awful things about him, but you mustn't repeat them the next day, or she'll be furious. I've done everything I could. I've told her what needed to be said. Too bad for her. A taxi stopped in front of the dome, and Lulu got out. She was carrying a large suitcase, and her face looked slightly solemn. "I've left Henri," she shouted from afar. She approached, bent under the weight of her suitcase. She was smiling. "What, Lulu?" said Rirette, taken aback. "You don't mean—" "Yes," said Lulu. "It's over. I dumped him." Rirette remained incredulous. "And he knows?" "You told him?" Lulu's eyes flared with fury. "Oh, yes," she said. Rirette still didn't know what to think, but in any case, she felt Lulu needed encouragement. "That's very good," she said. "You've been brave." She wanted to add, "See, it wasn't that hard," but she held back. Lulu basked in the admiration. Her cheeks were flushed, and her eyes were glowing. She sat down and placed the suitcase beside her. She was wearing a gray wool coat with a leather belt and a light yellow sweater with a rolled collar. She had no hat on. Rirette didn't like Lulu going around without a hat. She immediately recognized the curious mix of disapproval and joy she felt. Lulu always had that effect on her. What I love about her, Rirette decided, is her vitality. In a flash, Lulu said, I told him what was on my mind, and that was it. I can't believe it, said Rirette. But what's gotten into you, my little Lulu? You must have eaten a lion. Last night I would have bet my head that you wouldn't leave him. It's because of my little brother. I don't care if he acts superior with me, but I can't stand him treating my family that way. But how did it happen? What did he do? Where's the waiter? Lulu said, fidgeting in her chair. The waiters at the Dome are never around when you need them. Is the dark-haired one serving us? Yes, said Rirette. You know, I've won him over. Oh? Then be careful of the lady in the restroom. He's always hanging around with her. He flirts with her, but I think it's just an excuse to watch the women go in and out of the restroom. When they come out, he looks them straight in the eyes to make them blush. By the way, I'll be back in a minute. I have to go call Pierre. He's going to be stunned. If you see the waiter, order me a café cortado. I'll be back in a minute and tell you everything. She got up, took a few steps, then turned back to Rirette. I'm so happy, my dear Rirette. Dear Lulu, said Rirette, taking her hands. Lulu pulled away and crossed the terrace with a light step. Rirette watched her walk away. I never would have thought she was capable of this. How happy she is, she thought, slightly scandalized. That's what she gets for dumping her husband. If she had listened to me, she would have done it long ago. Anyway, it's thanks to me, really. I have a lot of influence over her. Lulu returned a few moments later. Pierre had to sit down, she said. He wanted details. But I'll give them to him in a moment. I'm having lunch with him. He says, maybe we can go out tomorrow night. How happy I am, Lulu, said Rirette. Tell me quickly, did he decide last night? You know, I didn't decide anything, said Lulu modestly. It decided itself. She tapped nervously on the table. Waiter, waiter. This waiter is annoying me. I'd like a cortado. Rirette was annoyed. In Lulu's place and under such serious circumstances, she wouldn't have wasted her time chasing after a cortado. Lulu had something charming about her, but it was astonishing how frivolous she could be. She was like a bird. Lulu burst out laughing. If you had seen Henri's face. I wonder what his mother will say, said Rirette seriously. My mother? She'll be delighted, said Lulu confidently. He was rude to her, you know? She'd had enough of him, always reproaching her for raising me badly, saying I was like this, I was like that it was obvious I had a backroom education. You know, what I did was partly for her too. But what happened? Well, he slapped Robert. But Robert went to your house. Yes. He stopped by this morning because my mother wants to get him an apprenticeship at Gompes's. I think I told you. So he came over while we were having breakfast, and Henri slapped him. But why? Asked Rirette, slightly annoyed. She hated the way Lulu told stories. They exchanged some words, said Lulu vaguely, and the kid doesn't keep quiet. He stands up for himself. Old ass, he told him, right to his face. Because Henri had called him rude. Of course, that's the only thing he ever says. I was dying of laughter, so Henri got up. We were having breakfast in the studio and slapped him. He could have killed him. So then you left? Leave? Said Lulu, surprised. Where? I thought you had left him at that moment. Listen, my dear Lulu, you have to tell me everything in order. Otherwise, I won't understand a thing. Tell me, she added, getting suspicious. Is it true that you left him? Of course, I've been explaining it for an hour. All right, so, Henri slapped Robert, and then? Then, said Lulu, I locked him out on the balcony. He looked ridiculous. He was still in his pajamas. He was knocking on the glass, but he didn't dare break it because he's as stingy as a louse. If it were me, I'd have smashed everything, even if I cut my hands to pieces. Then the Texiers arrived, and he started smiling at me through the window, trying to make it look like a joke. The waiter passed by, and Lulu grabbed him by the arm. So, you're the waiter? Would you mind bringing me a cortado? Rirette felt uncomfortable and gave the waiter a somewhat complicit smile, but the waiter remained grim and bowed with a reproachful politeness. Rirette slightly disapproved of Lulu. She never knew how to strike the right tone with subordinates. Sometimes she was too familiar, other times too demanding and curt. Lulu started laughing again. I'm laughing because I can see Henri in his pajamas on the balcony again. You know how I managed to lock him out? He was at the back of the studio, Robert was crying, and he was lecturing him. I opened the window and said, Look, Henri. A taxi ran over the florist. He came right over. He's quite fond of the florist because she told him she's Swiss, and he thinks she's in love with him. Where? Where? He asked. I slowly stepped back, went inside, and closed the window. I shouted through the glass, That'll teach you to bully my brother. I left him out there for more than an hour, staring at us with his eyes wide open. He was blue with rage. As for me, I stuck my tongue out at him and gave Robert chocolates. Then I packed my things in the studio and got dressed in front of Robert because I know Henri hates that. Robert kissed my arms and neck like a little man. It was adorable. We acted as if Henri wasn't even there. With all that, I forgot to wash up. And there he was, behind the window. That's hilarious, said Rirette, bursting into laughter. Lulu stopped laughing. I'm afraid he might have caught a cold, she said seriously. You don't think when you're angry. Then she continued cheerfully. He was shaking his fist at us and talking the whole time, but I didn't understand half of what he was saying. Then Robert left, and right after that, the Texiers knocked, so I let them in. When he saw them, he immediately put on a big smile and started jumping on the balcony. I told them, Look at my husband, my darling one. Doesn't he look like a fish in an aquarium? The Texiers waved at him through the glass. They were slightly bewildered, but they know how to keep their composure. I can just picture it. said Rirette, laughing. Ah, your husband on the balcony and the Texiers in the studio. She kept repeating, your husband on the balcony and the Texiers in the studio. She wanted to find some rare and picturesque words to describe Lulu's scene, thinking that Lulu didn't fully grasp its comedic aspect, but the words wouldn't come. I opened the window, said Lulu, and Henri came in. He kissed me in front of the Texier and called me his little rascal. The little rascal, he said, tried to play a trick on me. I smiled. The Texier smiled politely. Everyone was smiling. But when they left, he punched me in the ear, so I grabbed a brush and threw it at the side of his mouth. It split both his lips. My poor Lulu, said Rirette tenderly, but Lulu dismissed all pity with a wave of her hand. She stood tall, shaking her dark curls with a defiant air, and her eyes sparkled with fire. Then we explained ourselves. I wiped his mouth with a napkin and told him I had made a mistake, that I no longer loved him, and that I was leaving. He started crying and said he would kill himself. But that never happens. Do you remember, Rirette, last year when those stories about the Rhineland were going around? He would sing that to me every day. There's going to be a war, Lulu. I'll leave, and they'll kill me, and you'll regret it and feel guilty for all the pain you've caused me. Go on, you're unfit for service, I'd reply. They'll discharge you. Anyway, I calmed him down because he was talking about locking me up in the studio. I swore I wouldn't leave before a month had passed. Then he went to his desk. His eyes were red, and he had a strip of plastic cloth over his lip. He wasn't looking too great. I tidied up the house, put the lentils on the stove, and packed my suitcase. I left him a note on the kitchen table. What did you write? I wrote, said Lulu proudly. The lentils are on the stove. Serve yourself and turn off the gas. There's ham in the fridge. I'm fed up and I'm leaving. They both laughed, and a few passers-by turned to look. Rirette thought they must have been quite a charming sight and regretted not being seated at the terrace of the Viel or the Café de la Paix. When they finished laughing, they fell silent, and Rirette realized they had nothing left to say to each other. She felt a little disenchanted. I have to go, said Lulu, standing up. I'm meeting Pierre at noon. What should I do with my suitcase? Leave it with me, said Rirette. I'll drop it off with the bathhouse attendant for safekeeping. When will I see you again? I'll come by your place at 2. I have a ton of errands to run with you. I haven't gathered even half of my things. Pierre needs to give me some money. Lulu left, and Rirette called the waiter. She felt serious and sad for both of them. The waiter came over. Rirette had already noticed that he always hurried when she called. That'll be 5 francs, he said. Then, with a slightly dry tone, he added, You two were very cheerful. We could hear you laughing from far away. Lulu has hurt him, Rirette thought resentfully. She blushed and said, My friend was a bit nervous this morning. She's charming, said the waiter sincerely. Thank you, miss. He pocketed the 6 francs and left. Rirette felt a little dazed, but the clock struck noon, and she thought of Henri returning home to find Lulu's letter. It was a moment of quiet satisfaction for her. I'd like all of this sent to the Hôtel du Théâtre on Vendôme Street before tomorrow night, said Lulu to the cashier, with the air of a lady. She turned to Rirette. It's done, Rirette. We're leaving. Under what name? Asked the cashier. Madame Lucienne Crispin. Lulu threw her coat over her arm and started running. She dashed down the grand staircase of La Samaritaine. Rirette followed her, nearly stumbling multiple times because she wasn't watching her steps. Her eyes were fixed only on the slim figure in blue and canary yellow that danced ahead of her. And yet it's true that her body is obscene. Every time Rirette saw Lulu from behind or in profile, she was struck by the obscenity of her figure, but she couldn't explain why she had that impression. She's light and slender, but there's something indecent about her. I can't get past it. She does everything she can to shape herself. That must be it. She says she's ashamed of her backside and wears skirts that cling to her buttocks. Her behind is small, I get that, much smaller than mine, but it stands out more. It's perfectly round beneath her narrow waist, filling out the fabric. It looks sculpted, and what's more, it moves as if it were dancing. Lulu turned around, and they smiled at each other. Rirette thought about her friend's provocative body with a mix of disapproval and languor. Small, perky breasts, polished yellow skin. When touched, it might as well have been rubber. Long thighs. A lean, shameless body with elongated limbs. A black woman's body, Rirette thought. She looks like a black woman dancing the Roomba. Near the revolving door, a mirror reflected Rirette's fuller figure. I'm more athletic, she thought, taking Lulu's arm. She stands out more than I do when we're dressed, but completely naked. I'm certainly better than her. They walked in silence for a moment. Then Lulu said, Pierre was charming. You were charming too, Rirette. I'm very grateful to both of you. She said it with an awkward air, but Rirette paid no attention. Lulu had never known how to express gratitude. She was too shy for that. It's annoying, Lulu suddenly said, but I need to buy a bra. Here? Asked Rirette. They were passing in front of a lingerie shop. No, but I remembered because I saw this. I always go to Fisher for bra. The one on Boulevard Montparnasse? Exclaimed Rirette. Listen, Lulu, she continued seriously. It would be better to avoid Boulevard Montparnasse too much, especially at this hour. We might run into Henri, which would be extremely unpleasant. Henri? Said Lulu, shrugging. Nonsense. Why? Indignation flushed Rirette's cheeks and temples. You're always the same, my dear Lulu. When something bothers you, you simply deny it outright. You want to go to Fisher, so you insist that Henri doesn't pass by Boulevard Montparnasse. But you know perfectly well that he does. Every day, at 6. It's his route. You told me yourself. He walks up Rue de Rennes and waits for the AE at the corner of Boulevard Raspail. For one thing, it's only 5 o'clock, said Lulu. And then maybe he didn't go to the office. After what I wrote to him, he's probably in bed. But Lulu, Rirette suddenly said, there's another Fisher, you know, not far from the opera on Koch Septembre Street. Yes, said Lulu apathetically, but we'd have to go there. Oh, how I love my little Lulu. We'd have to go there, but it's just a few steps away, much closer than Place Montparnasse. I don't like the people who work there. Amused, Rirette thought that all Fisher stores sold the same items, but Lulu had incomprehensible stubbornness. Henri was clearly the last person she wanted to see at that moment, and yet it seemed as if she was deliberately putting herself in his path. Well, Rirette said indulgently, let's go to Montparnasse. Anyway, Henri is so tall we'll see him before he sees us. And besides, so what, said Lulu. If we run into him, we run into him. That's all. He's not going to eat us. Lulu wanted to walk to Montparnasse, saying she needed fresh air. They followed Rue du Seine, then Rue de l'Odéon, and finally Rue de Vaugirard. Rirette praised Pierre and pointed out how well he had handled the situation. Oh, how I love Paris, said Lulu. I'm going to miss it so much. Shut up, Lulu. When I think about how lucky you are to be going to Nice and you're saying you'll miss Paris. Lulu didn't reply. She looked around with a sad, searching expression. When they left Fisher's store, they heard the clock strike 6. Rirette took Lulu by the elbow and tried to hurry her along, but Lulu stopped in front of Baumann the florist. Look at those azaleas, my little Rirette. If I had a beautiful living room, I would put them everywhere. I don't like potted flowers, said Rirette. She was exasperated. She turned her head toward Wren Street and, naturally, within a second she saw Henri's tall, stupid silhouette appear. He was without a hat, wearing a brown wool sports suit. Rirette detested brown. "There he is, Lulu. There he is," she said hastily. "Where?" said Lulu. "Where is he?" She was not much calmer than Rirette. "Behind us, on the other sidewalk. Let's go and don't turn around." Lulu turned around anyway. "I see him now," she said. Rirette tried to pull her away, but Lulu stiffened, staring fixedly at Henri, and finally said, "I think he's seen us." She looked terrified, suddenly yielded to Rirette, and let herself be led away obediently. "Now, for heaven's sake, Lulu, don't turn around," said Rirette, a little breathless. "We'll turn right at the next street, Delambre Street." They walked very fast, bumping into passers-by. At times, Lulu was being dragged along. At others, she was the one pulling Rirette forward. But they hadn't reached the corner of Delambre Street when Rirette saw a large dark shadow behind Lulu and realized it was Henri. She began trembling with rage. Lulu kept her eyelids lowered with a mocking, stubborn expression. She regrets her recklessness, but it's too late. Too bad for her. They quickened their pace. Henri followed without a word. They passed Delambre Street and kept walking toward the observatory. Rirette listened to Henri's footsteps, hearing also a kind of light, regular wheezing punctuating his steps. It was his breathing. Henri had always breathed heavily, but never to this extent. He must have run to catch up with them. Or maybe it was the emotion. "We have to act like he's not there," Rirette thought, "not show that we notice him." But she couldn't help glancing from the corner of her eye. He was as pale as a sheet, his eyelids so low they looked shut. "He looks like a sleepwalker," thought Rirette, with a touch of horror. Henri's lips were trembling, and on his lower lip a small piece of pink tape trembled as well. And his breathing, always the same hoarse sound, now ending in a nasal whistle. Rirette felt uneasy. She wasn't afraid of Henri, but illness and passion always made her a little afraid. After a moment, Henri slowly reached out his hand, without looking, and took Lulu's arm. Lulu twisted her mouth as if she were about to cry, and shuddered as she pulled away. "Phew," Henri exhaled. Rirette had a wild urge to stop walking. She felt a stitch in her side, her ears buzzing. But Lulu was almost running now. She, too, looked like a sleepwalker. Rirette had the impression that if she let go of Lulu's arm and stopped, the two of them would keep running side by side, silent, pale as the dead, their eyes closed. Henri began to speak. His voice was strange and hoarse. "Come back with me." Lulu didn't answer. Henri repeated in the same rough, toneless voice, "You are my wife. Come back with me." "You can see she doesn't want to go back," Rirette answered through clenched teeth. "Leave her alone." He didn't seem to hear. He repeated, "I am your husband. I want you to come back with me." He took Lulu's arm again, and this time she didn't pull away. "Go away," said Rirette. "I won't go. I'll follow her everywhere. I want her to come home." He spoke with difficulty. Suddenly he twisted his face into a grimace, baring his teeth, and shouted at the top of his lungs, "You are mine." Some people turned to look, laughing. Henri shook Lulu's arm and growled like a beast, curling his lips back. Fortunately, an empty taxi passed by. Rirette hailed it, and it stopped. Henri stopped as well. Lulu wanted to keep walking, but they both held her firmly by the arms. "You must understand," said Rirette, pulling Lulu toward the street, "that violence will never bring her back to you." "Let go of her. Let go of my wife," said Henri, pulling in the opposite direction. Lulu was limp, like a bundle of clothes. "Are you getting in or not?" the driver shouted impatiently. Rirette let go of Lulu's arm and rained a flurry of blows on Henri's hands, but he didn't seem to feel them. After a moment, he let go and stared at Rirette with a blank expression, Rirette stared back. It was hard to gather her thoughts. An immense disgust washed over her. They stood like that for a few seconds, staring into each other's eyes, both panting. Then Rirette pulled herself together, took Lulu by the waist, and dragged her into the taxi. "Where to?" asked the driver. Henri had followed them and tried to get in with them, but Rirette pushed him away with all her strength and quickly shut the door. "Drive, drive," she told the driver. "I'll tell you where later." The taxi sped off, and Rirette sank into the seat. How vulgar all this is, she thought. She hated Lulu. "Where do you want to go, my little Lulu?" she asked gently. Lulu didn't answer. Rirette hugged her and became persuasive. "You have to answer me. Do you want me to take you to Pierre's house?" Lulu made a movement that Rirette took as a yes. She leaned forward. Messina 11. When Rirette turned back, Lulu was looking at her strangely. "What was it that he—" Rirette started. "I hate him," Lulu howled. "I hate Pierre. I hate Henri. Why do they all run after me? They torture me." She suddenly stopped and all her features twisted. "Cry," said Rirette with calm dignity. "Cry. It will do you good." Lulu doubled over and started sobbing. Rirette held her in her arms, pressing her close. From time to time she stroked her hair, but inside she felt cold and full of contempt. By the time the car stopped, Lulu had calmed down. She wiped her eyes and powdered her face. "Forgive me," she said kindly. "I was nervous. I couldn't bear seeing him like that. It hurt me." "He looked like an orangutan," said Rirette, relieved. Lulu smiled. "When will I see you again?" asked Rirette. "Oh, not before tomorrow. You know Pierre can't have me over because of his mother. I'm staying at the Hotel du Théâtre. I could come early, around 9 if you don't mind, because I have to visit my mother afterward." She was pale, and Rirette thought sadly how easily Lulu seemed to fall apart. "Don't wear yourself out too much tonight," she said. "I'm terribly tired," said Lulu. "I hope Pierre will let me leave early, but he never understands these things." Rirette stayed in the taxi and had herself taken home. For a moment, she thought about going to the movies, but she didn't feel like it. She threw her hat onto a chair and took a step toward the window. But the bed was calling her, so white, so soft, so damp in its shadowy hollow. To throw herself onto it, to feel the caress of the pillow on her burning cheeks. "I am strong. I'm the one who did everything for Lulu. And now, I'm alone, and no one does anything for me." She felt such pity for herself that a wave of sobs rose to her throat. "They're going to Nice, and I'll never see them again. I'm the one who made their happiness, but they won't think of me. And I'll stay here, working 8 hours a day, selling fake pearls at Burma." When the first tears rolled down her cheeks, she let herself gently fall onto the bed. "To Nice," she repeated, sobbing bitterly. "To Nice, to the sun, to the Riviera. Puff! Black night." It seemed like someone was walking around the room, a man in slippers, moving cautiously, first one foot, then the other, unable to avoid the slight creaking of the floor. He would stop. There would be a moment of silence. Then, suddenly drawn to the other side of the room, he would start again, like a maniac, pacing without purpose. Lulu felt cold. The blankets were too light. She had said "puff" out loud, and the sound of her own voice frightened her. Puff! I'm sure he's looking at the sky right now, at the stars, lighting a cigarette outside, saying he likes the mauve tint of the Parisian sky. Taking short steps, he's walking home in short steps. He feels poetic when he's just done that, he told me so. And light, like a cow that has just been milked. He's not thinking about it anymore, and I am stained. No wonder he feels pure right now. He left his filth here. In the darkness, there's a soaked towel, and the sheet is damp in the middle of the bed. I can't stretch my legs because I'd feel the wetness against my skin. What filth! And he's completely dry. I heard him whistling under the window as he left. He's down there, dry and fresh, in his nice clothes, in his mid-season overcoat. You have to admit, he knows how to dress. A woman could be proud to be seen with him. He was under my window, and I was naked in the dark, cold, rubbing my stomach with my hands because I still thought I was wet. "I'll come up for a minute," he said, "just to see your room." He stayed for 2 hours, and the bed creaked. That filthy little iron bed. I wonder where he found this hotel. He told me he had stayed here for 15 days once, that it was very nice. These rooms are strange. I've seen two. I've never seen rooms so small, and they're full of furniture. There are poufs and sofas and little tables. It reeks of love. I don't know if he stayed for 15 days, but he certainly wasn't alone. He must respect me very little to have brought me in here. The hotel porter laughed when we went up. He's Algerian. I hate that type. They scare me. He looked at my legs, then went into the office. He must have thought, that's it, they're gonna do it, and imagine dirty things. Apparently, what they do to women down there is horrifying. If one falls into their hands, she's crippled for life. And the whole time Pierre was bothering me, I kept thinking about that Algerian imagining what I was doing, picturing things even filthier than what was actually happening. There's someone in the room. Lulu held her breath, but the creaking stopped almost immediately. It hurts between my thighs. Sometimes it itches, sometimes it burns. I want to cry, and it'll be like this every night except tomorrow, because we'll be on the train. Lulu bit her lip and shuddered, remembering that she had moaned. That's not true. I didn't moan. I just breathed a little heavily because he's so heavy when he's on top that he cuts off my breath. He said to me, "You're moaning. You're enjoying it." I hate when people talk while doing that. I wish he would just forget. But he never stopped saying filthy things. I didn't moan. First of all, I can't feel pleasure. It's a fact. The doctor said so. Unless I do it myself. He doesn't want to believe it. They never want to believe it. They all say, "It's because you started off wrong, I'll teach you pleasure." I let them talk, but I know the truth. It's physiological. But that humiliates them. Someone is coming up the stairs. Someone returning. Unless, oh God, it's him coming back. He's quite capable of it if desire returns to him. No, it's not him. These are heavy footsteps. Unless, Lulu's heart jumped in her chest. Unless it's the Algerian. He knows I'm alone. He's going to come knock on the door. I can't bear this. No, it's upstairs. It's some guy coming back, fumbling with his key in the lock. It's taking him time. He's drunk. I wonder who stays in this hotel. They must be made to measure. At noon, I ran into a Russian woman on the stairs. She had the eyes of a drug addict. I didn't moan. But naturally, he ended up unsettling me with all his tricks. He knows how to do it. Men who know how to do it horrify me. I'd rather sleep with a virgin. Those hands that go straight where they should. That rub, that press just enough. Not too much. They take you for an instrument they're proud to know how to play. I hate being unsettled. My throat is dry, I'm afraid. My mouth tastes bitter, and I feel humiliated because they think they dominate me. I'd slap Pierre when he takes on that smug air and says, "I have technique." My God, to think that life is this, that this is what we dress up for, wash for, make ourselves pretty for, that this is what all the novels are written for, what we spend all our time thinking about, and in the end, this is what it is. You end up in a room with some guy who half suffocates you and then finally soaks your stomach. I want to sleep. Oh, if only I could sleep a little. Tomorrow night I'll be traveling all night. I'll be exhausted. I want to be at least somewhat fresh to walk around in Nice. They say it's so beautiful. Little Italian streets, colorful rags drying in the sun. I'd set up my easel and paint, and a few little girls would come to see what I was doing. Filth. She had shifted slightly, and her hip had touched the damp stain on the sheet. This is why he takes me. To do this. No one. No one loves me. He walked beside me and I was nearly fainting, waiting for a word of tenderness. If he had said, "I love you," I surely wouldn't have gone back with him. But I would have said something kind. We would have parted as good friends. I waited and waited. He took my arm, and I let him. Rirette was furious. It's not true that he looks like an orangutan, but I knew he was thinking something like that. I looked at him sideways with clouded eyes. It's amazing how cruel I can be. But still, even knowing that, when he took my arm, I didn't resist. But it wasn't me he wanted. He wanted his wife because he married me, and I'm his wife. He always put me down, said he was smarter than me, and everything that happened was his fault. He only had to treat me as his equal, and I'd still be with him. I'm sure that right now he doesn't miss me. He's not crying, he's panting. That's what he's doing. And he's very happy because he has the whole bed to himself and can stretch out his long legs. I want to die. I'm so afraid of what he might think of me. I couldn't explain anything to him because Rirette was between us. She talked and talked. She sounded hysterical. Now she's happy. She congratulates herself on her courage. What a joke. With Henri, who's as gentle as a lamb. I'll go with him. They can't force me to leave him like a stray dog. She jumped out of bed and flipped the switch. Stockings and a slip. That's enough. She didn't even bother to comb her hair. She was in such a hurry. And no one will know I'm naked under my long gray coat that falls to my feet. The Algerian, her heart pounded. She'd have to wake him up so he could unlock the door. She went down very slowly, but the steps creaked one by one. She knocked on the office window. "Who is it?" said the Algerian. His eyes were red, his hair disheveled. He didn't look very threatening. "Open the door," Lulu said curtly. 15 minutes later, she was knocking on Henri's door. "Who is it?" Henri asked through the door. "It's me." He didn't answer. He doesn't want to let me in. But I'll keep knocking until he opens. He'll give in because of the neighbors. After a minute, the door opened a crack, and Henri appeared, pale with a pimple on his nose. He was in pajamas. He hasn't slept, Lulu thought tenderly. I didn't want to leave like that. I wanted to see you again. Henri still said nothing. Lulu pushed past him slightly as she entered. How tiresome he is. He's always in the way, staring at me with those round eyes, arms hanging at his sides, not knowing what to do with his body. Shut up, come on, shut up. I can see you're overwhelmed, that you can't speak. He swallowed hard, and it was Lulu who had to close the door. I want us to separate as good friends, she said. He opened his mouth as if to speak, then suddenly spun on his heel and fled. What is he going to do? She didn't dare follow him. Is he crying? Suddenly she heard him cough. He's in the bathroom. When he returned, she threw her arms around his neck and pressed her mouth to his. He smelled of vomit. Lulu broke into sobs. I'm cold, said Henri. Let's go to bed, she suggested, still crying. I can stay here until morning. They lay down, and great sobs shook Lulu as she saw the room again. Her clean, lovely bed, the red light reflecting on the glass. She thought Henri would take her in his arms, but he didn't. He had stretched out stiffly, as if someone had planted a stake in the bed. He's as rigid as when he talks to a Swiss. She took his head in both hands and stared at him. You're pure, you're pure. He began to cry. How miserable I am, he said. I've never been so miserable. Me neither, said Lulu. They cried for a long time. After a while, she turned off the light and rested her head on his shoulder. If only we could stay like this forever, pure and sad, like orphans. But it's not possible. That doesn't happen in life. Life was an immense wave about to crash over Lulu and tear her from Henri's arms. Your hand. Your big hand. He's proud of them because they're large. He says that descendants of old families always have large extremities. He won't take my waist in his hands anymore. It used to tickle, but I was proud because he could almost touch his fingers together. It's not true that he's impotent. He's pure, pure, and a little lazy. She smiled through her tears and kissed him under his chin. What am I going to tell my parents? Henri murmured. My mother will die. Madame Crispin wouldn't die. On the contrary, she would triumph. They'll talk about me over dinner, the five of them, with an air of disapproval, like people who knew it all along but refrained from speaking because of the little one, 16 years old, too young for such topics. She'll laugh to herself because she knows everything. She always knows everything. And she hates me. All that filth and appearances are against me. Don't tell them everything right away, she pleaded. Tell them I went to Nice for health reasons. They won't believe me. She kissed Henri with quick little pecks all over his face. Henri, you weren't very kind to me. It's true, said Henri. I wasn't kind enough. But neither were you, he added thoughtfully. You weren't very kind either. Neither was I, said Lulu. Oh, how miserable we are. She cried so hard she thought she would choke. Soon it would be dawn, and she would leave. Never, never does one do what they want. You get swept away. You shouldn't have left like that, said Henri. Lulu sighed. I loved you, Henri. And now you don't love me anymore? It's not the same. Who are you leaving with? With people you don't know. How do you know people I don't know? Henri asked angrily. Where did you meet them? Let's not talk about that, dear, my little Gulliver. Don't start acting like my husband now. You're leaving with a man, Henri cried, sobbing. Listen, Henri, I swear I'm not. I swear on my mother's head. Right now, all men disgust me. I'm leaving with a married couple, friends of Rirette, older people. I want to live alone. They'll help me find work. Oh, Henri, if you only knew how much I need to be alone, how much all this disgusts me. What? Said Henri. What disgusts you? Everything. She kissed him. Only you don't disgust me, my dear. She slid her hands under Henri's pajamas and gently caressed his entire body. He shuddered under her cold hands but let her do it. He only said, I'm going to get sick. Something inside him was surely broken. At 7, Lulu got up, her eyes swollen from crying, and said wearily, I have to go back there. Where? I'm at the Hotel du Théâtre, on Vendôme Street, a shabby hotel. Stay with me. No, Henri, please don't insist. I've told you it's impossible. The wave carries you away. You can't judge. You can't understand. You can only let yourself be swept along. Tomorrow, I'll be in Nice. She went to the bathroom to wet her eyes with warm water. Shivering, she put on her coat again. It's like fate. As long as I can sleep on the train tonight, if not, I'll be shattered when I arrive in Nice. I hope I got a first-class ticket. It'll be the first time I travel first class. It's always like this. I've wanted for years to take a long trip in first class, and the day it finally happens, things turn out in such a way that I'll hardly enjoy it. Now she was eager to leave because these last moments had something unbearable about them. What are you going to do about that Galois? She asked. Galois had asked Henri for a recommendation. Henri had written it, and now Galois didn't want it. I don't know, Henri said. He had sunk under the blankets, only his hair and a bit of his ear visible. With a slow, soft voice, he said, I wish I could sleep for 8 days. Goodbye, my dear, said Lulu. Goodbye. She leaned over him, pulled back the covers slightly, and kissed his forehead. She lingered for a long time on the landing, unable to bring herself to close the door to the apartment. After a moment, she turned her head and violently pulled the doorknob shut. She heard a sharp noise and thought she was going to faint. She had felt something similar when the first shovelful of earth was thrown onto her father's coffin. Henri hadn't been very kind. He could have gotten up to walk me to the door. I think I would have felt less miserable if he had been the one to close it. "She did it," said Rirette, staring into the distance. "She did it." It was evening. Around 6 o'clock, Pierre had called Rirette, and she had met him at the dome. "But," said Pierre, "weren't you supposed to see her this morning at 9? "I did." "Didn't she seem strange?" "Of course not," said Rirette. "I didn't notice anything. She was a little tired, but she told me she had slept badly after you left because she was too excited about seeing Nice, and also a little afraid of the Algerian porter. Look, she even asked me if I thought you had booked first class on the train. She told me it had been her lifelong dream to travel in first class." "No," Rirette concluded. "I'm sure she didn't have anything like that in mind, at least while I was there. I stayed with her for 2 hours, and I'm quite observant about these things. I'd be surprised if anything had escaped me. You might say she's very good at hiding things, but I've known my Lulu for 4 years. I've seen her in all sorts of situations. I know her like the back of my hand. Then it must have been the Texiers who convinced her. It's strange." He pondered for a few moments and then suddenly continued, "I wonder who gave them Lulu's address. I was the one who picked that hotel, and she had never heard of it before." He absent-mindedly played with Lulu's letter, and Rirette was annoyed because she wanted to read it, but he wasn't offering it to her. "When did you receive it?" she finally asked. "The letter?" He handed it to her casually. "Here, you can read it. They must have left it at the front desk about an hour ago." It was a thin violet sheet, the kind sold at cigarette stands. "My dearest, the Texiers have come. I don't know who gave them the address, and I'm going to make you very sad, but I'm not leaving, my love. My dear Pierre, I'm staying with Henri because he is too miserable. They went to see him this morning. He didn't want to open the door, and Madame Texier said he didn't even look human. They were very kind and understood my reasons. She says everything is his fault, that he's a bear, but that deep down he isn't bad. She says he needed this to realize how much he is tied to me. I don't know who gave them my address. They didn't tell me. They must have seen me by chance when I left the hotel with Rirette this morning. Madame Texier told me she understood that she was asking me to make a huge sacrifice, but that she knew me well enough to be sure I wouldn't refuse it. I'm very sorry about our beautiful trip to Nice, but I don't think you will be too unhappy, my love, because you will always have me. I am yours with all my heart and all my body, and we will see each other just as often as before. If he lost me, Henri would kill himself. He needs me. I assure you, I don't enjoy having such a responsibility. I hope you won't make a fuss. You wouldn't want me to feel guilty, would you? I'm going back to Henri right away. I'm a little nervous because I know I'm going to see him in that state, but I'll have the courage to impose my conditions. First of all, I want more freedom because I love you. I also want him to leave Robert alone and never speak ill of my mother again. I'm very sad, darling. I wish you were here. I desire you. I press myself against you, and I feel your caresses all over my body. I will be at the Dome tomorrow at 5. Lulu. My poor Pierre. Rirette had taken his hand. I'll tell you, said Pierre. I feel sorry for her more than anything. She needed air and sunlight. But since she has decided, my mother made a terrible scene, he continued. The villa belongs to her, and she didn't want me bringing a woman there. Oh, said Rirette, her voice unsteady. Oh? Then it's just perfect. Everyone's happy. She let go of Pierre's hand and, without knowing why, felt overcome by a bitter sorrow. The end.